Thank you for coming to the second part of this series. The topic tonight is In Gods We Trust. It is a continuation of the concept of loss. And last week's presentation was Is Death the End? We began the beginning of the show with a video called Our Story in 2 Minutes. It's the human story of the planet consciousness. So what I'd like to do is introduce Dr. Susan Fry, an explorer, an eclectic explorer, and a person with many, many successful careers. Dr. Carl Rook, professor of classical studies at Boston University, and myself, Richard Emanuel, minister of an experimental church on East Main Street. The topics tonight are personal expressions dealing with the subject In Gods We Trust. Each one of us will take a point of view, and we will begin with the story. As life forms have evolved in the planet, stories have been created, and Dr. Carl Rook will pick up where he left last week, and I turn it over to you, Carl. Thank you.
Thank you. Is the microphone working? Good. I left you hanging last week. I had promised to tell you what death is, and I ran out of time. But unfortunately, I still have enough time to tell you. And so, eschatology, the study of what happens at the end. And actually, the New Testament doesn't give us any details about the end, and that's because the Christians thought that the end was going to come within their own lifetime. All that is mentioned is that there's going to be a rapture of the living for a final judgment, but that was supposed to happen within the lifespan of the disciples. So it didn't come. A great disappointment. So it eventually was postponed to the first millennium. Didn't happen then either. The subsequent mid-second millennium, about 1500, still didn't happen, and we passed the second millennium, and people are now predicting it in less large segments. So I think it was supposed to happen 10 years ago, 5 years ago, but it still doesn't happen. The problem is that Christianity is derived from Judaism, and Judaism went through a radical patriarchal revision around the 8th century, in which it got rid of the goddess, ended up with Yahweh, a god who doesn't have a consort, and there is no afterlife in Judaism. Some people may know of it, but that's a later invention, as I'll show. The rapture of the living, in fact, is something that St. Paul elaborated. As someone who had never seen Christ in this world, he claims validation for his teaching on the basis of having been seized up to the Empyrean while still alive. Many of the things that Christians believe are in the New Testament aren't there at all. They're inventions of Paul. His rapture to the Empyrean is obviously a shamanic experience. There he heard a mystery, words so secret that no human lips could repeat them. And here in Thessalonians, we have his statement, "We who are still alive and remain will be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air." But he's not going to tell you what he heard. I began last week by talking about my introduction into psychoactive substances, the invention of the word entheogen, and in order to understand my concept of what happens at the end, we can quote William James, who in his Varieties of Religious Experience said, "Our normal waking consciousness, rational consciousness as we call it, is but one especial type of consciousness, while all about it, parted from it by the filmiest of screens, there lie potential forms of consciousness entirely different." Consciousness, what is it? We as humans experienced a spiritual awakening sometime in the Paleolithic, and we left expressions of that painted on the walls of caves. The special plants that opened up a new awareness of our human existence, it was a plant that was animate with the spirit of deity, an entheogen, a visionary vehicle for the trip of the first shaman. Either driven by hunger to experiment with novel foods, or perhaps expressly directed by a shaman capable of communicating with the indwelling spirit of the entheogen, humankind experienced a heightened level of consciousness that spurred the rapid dominance of the species over its competitors among the Earth's creatures. This special substance may be what made us a different kind of creature. Peter Webster has argued that there was a first supper at the beginning of our elevation over the other creatures of this planet, and that the Last Supper is merely a commemoration of that same event. Here I quote from Gordon Wasson, which he speaks about this expansion of human consciousness caused by the ingestion of the entheogen. The experience, what is it? Is it similar to what one experiences under the effect of a psychoactive substance? This is the report of the first clinical LSD experience. He said, "My consciousness expanded at an inconceivable speed and reached cosmic dimensions. There was no more difference between me and the universe. Whilst this was happening, I found myself at the center of a cosmic drama of unimaginable dimensions. I would say today that I possibly experienced the Big Bang passes through black holes and white holes, identification with exploding supernovas and collapsing stars and other strange phenomena. Those of you here last week will recall that that is exactly the kind of experience that Maria Sabina, the illiterate shaman from Oaxaca, described. So, what these cave paintings indicate is the origin of Plato's myth of the cave. They painted things on the walls of the cave. The walls of the cave were meant to call into the cave entities from outside the cave, and also to allow a passageway through the wall to another dimension. The journey of the spirit through the barrier to the world beyond. This is an interesting sculpture in Paris. And of course, all of these ideas, as I mentioned last time, become part of the popular culture. And so here's one of the X-Men, Katie Pride, who walks through barriers. This record that we left on the walls of caves has led Werner Herzog, you probably have seen The Cave of Forgotten Dreams, to express the idea that we should not be called Homo sapiens, but a better term would be Homo spiritualis. We became different by our awareness of the fact that we live in only one of several alternate dimensions. What one experiences in Plato's cave is liberation from ordinary seeing. Liberation from the world of shadows. Escape from the cave. Here, in fact, we are escaping from the backside of Albert Hoffman's head. So, what is going on? All around the world, there are myths about how fire was stolen and given to humankind. Fire is metamorphic, a metamorphic for the semen of deity, and it's found in the psychoactive plants that figure in the primordial rituals of shamanism that established the plant as a metaphoric tree affording a pathway of transcendence. The myth of Prometheus' theft of fire in its details indicates that what he stole was a magical plant. This established a flaming pillar between the two sources, natural sources of fire, that man would have encountered. One was the fall of the lightning bolt from the sky, from the Empyrean, and the other was the burning fire at the base of the volcano. So fire itself is cognate with consciousness, scintilla anima, the spark of the soul. Quite simply, we are obviously different from inanimate matter in that we produce heat. We must be on fire. And as you know, all fire rises. Fire was one of the four basic elements, but unlike the other three, it's the only one that does not have material existence. It has to go as far as it can, obviously. And so it would collect in a great reservoir at the edge of the universe. This was the Empyrean. The conglomerate of every fire ever lit, and also, obviously, the end of every thought or every consciousness that ever existed. And so man has fantasized the passageway up to that Empyrean. And these are common terms too. Symbol metaphor, another term for the Empyrean in antiquity was the aether, which is ether, and we have now mechanized that in our Ethernet, which is, as you know, the composite of all knowledge. There are many universes, and a science of noetics, studying consciousness, perhaps a pseudoscience, investigates things such as spontaneous remission, meditation, consciousness, alternative healing practices, consciousness-based healthcare, spirituality, human potential, psychic abilities, and the survival of consciousness after bodily death. Many of you, no doubt, have read Dan Brown's Lost Symbol. Another name for this empyrean, for this ether, is the noosphere, nous being consciousness. So there are two places you can go. You can go down, pulled by gravity, to the center of this planet. I explained last time that maybe we don't ever leave the geocentric universe that we're born into. So you, in the patterns of the stories in classical mythologies and mythologies around the world, you go down to the center of the earth. That's the place of arrival, called Elysium. Initially was separate from Hades, but eventually was open to everyone who died, except for those who were incurably evil. This was added later because the universe doesn't really care whether you're good or bad. But we invented the idea that there was a place of torture in the underworld, Tartarus, but most people wouldn't go there. Elysium itself is a blessed place, as you know, from Schiller's poem, which is the text for Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, Daughter of Elysium. So, where do we go? Persons who've had the near-death experience commonly report this journey toward the light at the end of the tunnel. As Susan mentioned last time, however, that is not death, it's near death. But it's an extraordinary experience because shamans have demonstrated that consciousness is separable from the body. People who are gifted, and I know such people, and I know people who are quite reputable who would testify to this, that all you have to do is think Paris. And if you're gifted, you're in Paris. That sounds as though maybe you only think you're in Paris. But a doctor gathering information in reputable journals about the death experience recorded that one experiment showed that a painting hung from the ceiling of the operating room so that its surface could be viewed only from the ceiling. Patients who had the near-death experience were able to report what they saw. So obviously, their consciousness must have been out of their body and looking down at their body. But they're not, that doesn't mean to say that they're dead. That means that their consciousness has separated from their body. Here you have his report. At the juncture when her heart stopped, she passed through a tunnel toward a brilliant light. There she met several deceased relatives who advised her to go back lest she not survive the surgery. That is not death, however. Consciousness is obviously separable from the body. Shamans do it all the time. But it's possible that the ember of the fire of consciousness goes out when the body dies. It may, however, survive, but it may be that it cannot interpret anything except through the body. So what you would experience, what consciousness would experience through the body would be life. If it experiences anything without the body, it's not life, it's something else. Where do you go? You obviously don't go up, you obviously don't go down. There's no reason why you go anywhere. Perhaps you just are here in the same room. I don't mean to frighten you, but I can see all of you as objects, and you see me as an object. Can you train yourselves to see what's between the objects? We know that matter itself is basically space. We see it there. We don't see through it. Where is the future? The future is here. That's why there is such a phenomenon as clairvoyance. Where is the past? It's here. It's all relative. We cannot handle ideas of that kind. But this is where death is. It's another version of this. And so, two versions of the ecstasy. That's probably not going to satisfy you about what death is. But quite frankly, it is. I got it here. This is the. Now, I did have a whole presentation on In God's We Trust. It's important for you. It's important for you to see that it's plural. But I've used up my time, and perhaps next week I'll tell you my version of that. I turn it over now to Richard. Exactly time.
I'm going to pick up where the last consciousness of a period called the Age of Pisces. We've had 2,000 years, it's ended, of monotheism. The ancient world was not constructed out of monotheism. It was constructed out of a pantheon of gods. And the history of gods is the history of humankind, because we gave them all the attributes, the good things, the bad things that human beings do. This period that we're going through is a period of great loss, because with the destruction of the sky goddess, we put the entire universe from this point of view out of order. And that process continues now. Look at what we are doing to the planet. We are experiencing a collective death of Gaia, of the living feminine. Males have become so detached from the world. Look what we put up. Skyscrapers that are penises to the heavens. This story's been told before. The Tower of Babel. We can look to various scriptures. We can look to different cultures. We can take stories. And all of the stories deal with the concept of a beginning and an end. And this is our struggle. We don't know where we began and where we end. The end is a surprise. And as Carl said, this world we call life is based upon this experience. There is no life after death. It's another dimension. It's another sense of being. So the subject is not whether we live or die. It's what are we as beings, and how do we understand that consciousness of being. When the gods revealed themselves, they revealed it in terms of the amusement of humankind. We were the entertainment. And then a pharaoh came, Akhenaten, and said, no, there's no pantheon of gods, there's one God. And that one God is the attributes of all the gods combined and all humanity combined. And the symbol was a sun disk with multiple rays coming from the sun, and at the end of each ray was a hand that you reached, and it took you back to the source. In Judaism, the subject was addressed when God reveals, I am the Am before all Ams. What does that mean? Being. What was brought into being? Gore Vidal made a very interesting comment when he was asked, not a year before his death, that what is the worst thing human beings have created? And without a flinch, he said monotheism. Because monotheism is the equivalent of totalitarianism. It is my way or the highway. And so here we are, 2,000 years later, and the story is failing us. Why did Rome embrace Christianity? Because it was a total story. You were given, here's what happens to you when you die. Jesus is the source to the Father. It was an insurance policy. We had a rabbi come many years ago, probably 25 years ago, to the church, and he asked me, "Who do you represent?" And I said to him, well, Rabbi, that's an important question. I said, from your standpoint, you have a history, you have a tradition, you have a story. And therefore, those persons who subscribe to your story have insurance. Look at me, I represent the uninsured. There's no story. And that's what I believe. That's what I've come to know. And in this process of coming to know, each of us has to know your own story. It's not about somebody else's story. And that's what brings you into consciousness. That's what brings us here tonight. We're exploring a very difficult subject. And the subject is our own demise. What happens to you? What is the process of death? Is it a portal? Yes, it's a doorway. All the clues are here. Architecture, a space. It all represents a universe. As far as we know, this is the universe tonight. There's nothing beyond the walls. It's like a twilight zone. We don't know until you go outside. You don't know there's an outside. That was the purpose of Plato's cave story. So here we are, struggling once again to understand who we are and what are we doing here. As I said last week, Aristotle, Socrates, great minds, Socrates said, the beginning of wisdom happens when you understand how little you know. So here we are again and again, struggling with what is the meaning to this existence. Well, there is no meaning to this existence until you become it, until you be it. You are the meaning. And this is what the ancients, this is where the process of where the problem of altered states of consciousness, we don't want to see where we came from. It's scary. That's why we had a show of the origins of the universe and coming into our consciousness as human beings. And then what happens? We get struck by a meteor, and it takes out the earth. And then in 2 billion years, if our consciousness is still taking this in, Andromeda will be absorbing our Milky Way. 2 galaxies will be devouring one another. It's a violent universe. We understood that from the beginning. As our consciousness rose, we saw, whoa, I could die here. This could all be over. That little mammal would not have survived if the dinosaurs were not wiped out. So each age has an age of its beginning and its end. And then I'm always asking, who's writing this script? And then I think, well, aren't we? It is a very difficult process when you don't have insurance. Insurance is make-believe. It's a fallacy. There is no insurance. That's where the word trust comes in. The word trust means something other than yourself. You're trusting an entity outside of yourself because you do not understand yourself. And so therefore you are looking for some kind of something to hang on to. The Roman Catholic Church has existed for 2,000 years. It was a great insurance policy, and that empire is collapsing. Just think of why Rome, again, acceded to giving up its ancient pantheon of gods for a insurance policy. I mean, it's so when you examine it, it becomes, wait a minute, isn't this a no-brainer? You know, we can't take any of this with us. There is no meaning to this until you make it meaning. And that's why our propensity as a species to go into altered states is to explore other pathways. I'm not telling people to take drugs. I mean, the process is, it's sacred. You don't take those for amusement. If you are exploring something, you are taking it with the greatest respect, knowing that in your journey as an explorer, you could be killed doing it. You could be run over. And here we are again, struggling. When you go out the door, you're going to go back into the world again. And this will become a moment in your memory. And that's why we chose to have 4-part series of this. The subject is big. It will not stop. And we hope that this conversation, this medium, will continue throughout the years. That we come together, people, 1, 2, 3 people, come together and talk about these things. Talk about your feelings. Talk about what you've discovered. Nobody's talking to one another. And that's what we need to do. Look how we've substituted things. The cell phone. I won't go into that one. But anyhow, I'm going to turn the session over to Dr. Susan Fry and let her continue where I left off. Susan.
There's a saying in public speaking that you should never follow dogs, small dogs, or children, or Richard Emanuel. I just want to start with a segue from last week's topic, which was, is death the end? Very interestingly, since that conversation, or we are actually going to have a conversation after. That's why we limited ourselves to, well, Richard didn't even take his 15 minutes. But I found this, when Henry posted our edited film on YouTube, I happened to scroll down some of the other, topics, because, if you get into the YouTube, we're talking about death, so there's all. So I got into this debate. It's sponsored by the Intelligence Squared Debates, and they are out of Washington or New York, and they're usually talking about foreign policy or some politics or something. Well, the title of this one was "Death is Not Final." So I said, I got to listen to this. So it's an hour and 45 minutes, and so it was very interesting because it really segued what we talked about last week about the NDEs, which is the NDE, near-death experience. Well, they had 2 neurologists, Dr. Alexander, a neurologist teaching at Harvard for 20 years, who had an NDE from bacterial meningitis. And his partner was Dr. Malloy? What was it? Mooney, Dr. Mooney. He is a PhD, MD, who's done a lot of research in that field. And then their opponents in the debate, which was there is no life after death. Death is final. It is. They were 2 physicists from hell. No, really, they were so arrogant about. But anyway, the bottom line was, first of all, there's no consensus about consciousness. We don't actually, even after all these books and everything has been, even the physicists said, we don't know what consciousness is. So how do we know if it's not separate from the body? If we don't even know what it is. And the other thing was, of course, they had a vote at the end of the debate, and it was a very, very slight margin for the guys the two physicists who said, the science is clear, there is nothing after death, and that's the bottom line. And I think they got 2% of the votes. But there were 12% undetermined. So that's the probability. Who knows where that curve was going to go? But it was very interesting because it all comes down to what I'm talking about tonight, really, which is about belief systems. Because you got people believe this, people believe that. They're both equally, on the scale of, if we measure intelligence by doctorates, don't believe, don't. But that's basically what we do. And they were equal but they were both adamant about what they believed, because that's basically where it still is. It's in a belief structure. So as Richard said, I have been an explorer. I've worn many hats, and I'm wearing another one tonight. I hate to disappoint. My grandmother was a milliner, so I grew up with hats, and of course, as a Catholic girl, I had to wear hats to church all the time. And speaking of, my journey or my exploring, I was raised Catholic, and I chose a Catholic nursing college. And after that experience, I retreated from the practice of Catholicism, but I remained a Christian. And I married one of my Vietnam patients who decided to do graduate study at a theological seminary to become a Presbyterian minister. So he did, and while he was studying Buber and Western theology, I got interested in the Eastern lifestyles and religions and belief systems and everything. So needless to say, the marriage didn't last. But it lasted 13 years, which was a miracle, actually. So I've always been like an explorer. And when George was in seminary, I started doing yoga. This is like 1970. And my yogi was a Hindu. So I kind of like, whoa, this is interesting, Hinduism. There were certain things about Hinduism that really interested me. One, I believe it's the world's oldest religion. I'm not sure, but it's old. We know that. And also, it's actually one of the tenets behind Hinduism, of course, is the ultimate search for truth. And it has 9 tenets, and some of them were appealing to me. I like the idea that karma, which is what we gather in terms of how we live our life, how it's going to influence they believe in, of course, reincarnation. And the symbol for the Hindus, of course, is Shiva, which represents the creation and the destruction. It's a cycle, and we are creating and destroying all simultaneously, and it goes on ad infinitum until the ultimate liberation. They also believe that all spiritual paths lead to salvation, so you actually don't have to be a Hindu. So while I did the yoga thing until we moved from Kentucky, I gave up Hinduism after I gave up my yogi and went on to the next, we lived in St. Louis, Charles, St. Louis, Missouri. And George was then a minister, and I was studying Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism, because I had heard the Dalai Lama speak. And I thought, oh, the Buddhism, that sounds good too, you know? First of all, it had one really important aspect to it. See, it's one of the religions that Buddha. The Western Buddhism is inclusive of women. So you can be a woman and be a lama. You can even reincarnate into Buddhahood as a woman. So that was good. There was possibilities. I was going somewhere. But there were certain things. I actually was a devotee with a guru for a couple of years, but that's one of the things that turned me off. I'm really not a good follower of a guru. My cat became my guru after that, and he died just 2 years ago. For 23 years, he was my guru because he represented everything I would be triggered in terms of for a guru. Well, anyway, but the Tibetan Buddhism is very interesting because especially we actually have a fairly active Buddhist community here in Cape Ann. So I'm not going to teach Buddhism or anything like that, but if anyone's interested, it's very interesting. Also, I like the idea that it was harm to no sentient being. All beings. You don't kill a fly. Well, I have, but that's my karma I'll take into the next the next go around. So that was in the 80s. And in the 90s, I kind of started looking at pantheism, because pantheism really is about nature. And that interested me because I was looking for a doctoral thesis, because my study was to be in natural science. That's what I wanted my doctorate in. I wanted to go back to the sciences. I had a degree in architecture before that. So I went back to the sciences, but I didn't want I wanted the natural sciences, which would bring me into what they call alternative medicine. So I started looking into pantheistic beliefs. And so pantheism, of course, is about nature, about being in harmony with nature and having great reference for the cosmos and for nature. But it had some limitations. So when I finally finished my coursework for the doctorate, I had to find a thesis topic. And so I looked into Taoism, which is Taoism. And the symbol for Taoism, of course, is the yin-yang symbol. Because Taoism really had just about everything that I wanted. It had more or less of a lifestyle. It's actually called the Way. And it's living in harmony with nature. And some of the practices out of Taoism include feng shui. So my place is feng shui to death. Feng shui right up the yin-yang, let me tell you. And also, it had, it's about the 5 elements. You know, Carl mentioned the fire. This is water, air, metal. You know, those are the elements of the earth. It's related to Confucianism, but it's a little bit different, but they're in the same family. It also has the lifestyle like Tai Chi. We have Tai Chi here at the center, and several of us are in the Tai Chi class. Martial arts, Qigong, anything of that nature, and health and diet is also very much part of Taoism. So I think that I actually ended up, my thesis was on Taoism in the public school system. And my book, after it was published, got into some hands of at Harvard Medical School, and I ended up speaking at the Learning and Brain Conference 3 years in a row on how do you bring in spiritual, because Taoism also equals spirituality to me. That was my premise. And so that got me into a lot of speaking and working in schools, and and anyway, so that brought me basically to where I feel my beliefs, it's a belief system like anything. And so when we were talking about what are the gods we trust now, because Taoism really isn't about one god. They do believe in spirits, but there's no grand pupa. There's no top guru or anything like that. So coming into the 21st century, I had to look at what in gods we trust. And it's not so much that we live in a secular society, but we do. And we seem to have abandoned a lot of rituals related to various religious practices. So the gods, my take on the 21st century deities are technology. We think that technology is going to solve all our problems. The unfortunate thing about technology, anything that goes out of amok, like technology is in this culture now, will take us down, ultimately. But that's one of the gods we have. Another god we have is, and I don't consider myself a scientist, but I mean, I need a blind study for just about everything, double blind. In science we trust. We're also putting the same onus, the burden on science, that the science is going to solve all our problems. Another important deity is consumerism. We are no longer citizens of the world, we are consumers. And what people go through to be the first in line at Walmart for Thanksgiving is people kill each other over crap, total crap. All right, we got the other consumerism, technology, science. Oh, the big one. Kids actually check this off as a career choice. Celebrity. It's not, what do you want to be a celebrity for? It's just, I want to be a celebrity. Brain surgeon, fireman, celebrity. No talent, no looks. I don't even think she's attractive. That's, what's her name? Miley Cyrus. Yeah. The tongue must have something to do with it, too. I don't know. Anyway, but this is what we worship now. Especially the younger generation. This is what they want to be, Miley Cyrus. And of course, the big god is this, money. Now, I'm not saying that we don't need money, because we need money to live, we need money to do this. We need money to survive, but when is it too much? When is enough enough? When I was growing up, if your parents were millionaires, wow, you were rich. Then around 1990, your parents had to have at least 10 million to be considered rich. In 2000, you better have 50 million. And now, if you aren't a billionaire, take the leap out of the, Wall Street's highest window. And probably there might be trillionaires at this point. The Koch brothers might be trillionaires, I don't know. But anyway, when is enough enough? And what we worship is what we become. So I don't know, in Carl's, Carl said, where do we go? Is money going to bring us to where we're destined after, There are no pockets and shrouds, as they say, and we're not going to take anything with us. And if we have money, what are we doing with it? What are we doing with it? Are we hoarding it? Are we keeping it? Is the yacht have to be now 7 stories and 800 feet long? I mean, when is it enough? So anyway, that's my shtick on the gods that seem to be in our consciousness in this time and age, and I don't know. We are going to have we're going to open this up and turn the lights on because we need to really hear from everybody, and we're not authorities on any subject except for Carl. But we just want to talk about these things. And as he said, death is a big topic in society now, which is really interesting. I was shocked and then also on Link TV, which is part of Direct TV, if you have a satellite dish, they have some interesting programs. I listened to, just this week, a program on the art of living and dying, and it was a panel of 3, and they were talking just what we're talking about. So I guess it's a hot topic now. But everything has its time. So anyway, thank you.